Regenerations. In the not-so-distant future, a company called Artificial Technical Industries specializes in artificial intelligence-driven technology. Its many divisions work tirelessly to bring new content to its consumers, who lately have been growing tired of the repetitive and unrealistic virtual reality simulators the company generates. Once on the cutting edge of development and research, ATI has been desperately trying to grow its dwindling and shrinking customer base. Recent government regulations have impeded their research and has halted the advancement of the technology. The head of the Image Generation Department, or IGD, is a young and eager scientist named Yuki Nakamura. She was recently hired to bring new life to the dwindling department, which once thrived with innovation and breakthrough. But in recent years, people have lost interest in image generation due to its limitations caused by rules enforced by the government. 6 months ago in the virtual reality department, they were experiencing the same lack of interest from the public, and they were desperate to innovate the technology. On the brink of a groundbreaking discovery, Dr. Yamamoto, the most experienced scientist at the company and the head of the department, suddenly and mysteriously went missing. It's just another typical morning in the IGD. People are trying to look busy in their not-so-busy department, filled with cubicles and computers. Yuki, asleep at her desk, is awoken by a notification on her device, summoning her to the VRD, much to her surprise. As she walks out of the department, one of the technicians, impatiently waiting for her to walk by, starts to ask her questions about the system generating irregular and inconsistent images. Yuki, not knowing what to say, responds by telling him, "Just keep regenerating," and blows him off. The ATI facility is enormous, and it took some time to navigate her way to the VRD. On arrival, she notices the department entrance is locked electronically. She receives a message on her device, and it's a 6-number passcode. She entered the code and the door opened. She stepped into the seemingly empty department, with the door closing behind her. Her eyes were immediately drawn to the large sphere, about the size of a small house in the middle of the large space, in front of it, a computer terminal with a digital scanner next to it. The whole department resembled a large workshop. Unexpectedly, sitting at the table is the head CEO and co-founder of ATI, Hiroshi Suzuki, alongside him, junior VRD scientist Kenji, former assistant to Dr. Yamamoto. Hiroshi explains to Yuki that 6 months ago, they made a breakthrough in virtual reality technology. Usually VR simulators are primitive and cartoonish. No one wants to be an avatar, they want to touch and feel something, they want to go somewhere. But up until now that wasn't possible. Hiroshi introduces Kenji. And Kenji explains that recently they made a breakthrough discovery that if they scan old celluloid film in real time, they can create a super realistic VR world, in the sphere, based on the information on the film stock. Yuki, only ever hearing stories about obsolete celluloid film, is confused, and wonders what this has to do with her as she mostly knows about working with digital images. Hiroshi continues to explain that 6 months ago, on the verge of a great discovery, they went against government protocol. Dr. Yamamoto made himself the test subject and entered the sphere haphazardly. Everything within the sphere is made up of carbon data, which gives everything a solid and realistic feel to it. But carbon data cannot be stored, only experienced in real time. While Yamamoto was in the sphere, everything seemed to be going fine, but due to the energy constraint on the facility, the power cut off for just a brief moment. After the system rebooted, Yamamoto was gone. We did not anticipate for a power outage. The three of them walk over to the scanner terminal, beside the sphere, and look closer at the film stock in the scanner. Previewing it on the terminal, it was from the late 20th century, a time when celluloid was abundant. Hiroshi explains, time is of the essence, because the government is threatening to investigate, and it's only a matter of days. The plan is to send Yuki into the sphere, find Yamamoto, and take celluloid images of him and bring the film back through the sphere. We will then superimpose his image onto the original film, and that, in theory, should regenerate his organic carbon data within the sphere. Yuki is shocked and confused as to why they would send her into the sphere, but offers some advice. Why don't you just print a digital image of him, and superimpose that onto the film? Kenji tells her that it only works on images captured and exposed by natural light, so naturally, celluloid from the late 20th century contains the most carbon data to be tapped into. Yuki initially refuses, but Hiroshi reminds her that she is the leading expert on image imposition, that's why she works here. In order to avoid government investigations, we need to send someone from inside the company to help us regenerate Dr. Yamamoto. Also, there is another very serious reason she must accept the mission. Hiroshi was the only one who really knew Dr. Yamamoto, they started the company together. But ever since he went missing 6 months ago, Hiroshi's life has changed dramatically. Several people he is close to have completely vanished without a trace. Kenji fears it is a negative effect of time dilation. Like time travel. What happens here could change the fate of the world and they need to act quickly. That night, Yuki laid in her bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep because of anxious anticipation. Her fat kitty cat Whiskers is cuddled up with her. Yuki prompted her device to take a photo and snapped a picture of her beloved pet to take with her on her journey. The following morning she got ready to leave and put out enough cat food to last Whiskers a whole week. She kissed the fat little critter, said goodbye, and embarked on her adventure. Yuki arrives at the lab and begins to prepare herself to enter the sphere. Before she goes, she has a few questions. She wants to know if her device will function in the sphere, and Kenji tells her yes, with full communication functions intact, but we have deactivated the camera and removed the lens. The reason is that whenever we try to observe what happens in the sphere, it doesn't operate correctly. Any kind of modern visual observation device will cause the sphere to malfunction, it acts differently when we observe it. Yuki, out of suspicion, asks if we're dealing with quantum mechanics and artificial intelligence, reminding them that combining the two is illegal and brings the maximum penalty. The answer is yes, and they've underestimated what they were dealing with, another reason she would have to succeed at her mission. Before commencing, Hiroshi gifts young Yuki with a box. A box containing an old celluloid camera from the late 20th century. The one that she would use to capture Dr. Yamamoto. It shouldn't be hard to find film stock and batteries for this camera, in this time period. As long as the batteries are not in the old camera, it should not affect the sphere. They say their goodbyes, Hiroshi and Kenji wish her good luck and she is on her way. They begin to power up the sphere. The whole department begins to rumble. She walks down the raised walkway towards the sphere and hesitantly approaches the portal entrance. Slowly, she extends her hand through the bright light. Pulling it back out, she examines it thoroughly. Then, following a brief moment of contemplation, she leaps through. Sometime in the late 20th century, Yuki jumps out of a bright portal. She's on a busy street in the middle of old Tokyo. Without hesitating, she pulls out her device and prompts it to find her location. Unknown. She then prompts the device to send Kenji a message, to indicate her safe arrival. It was unusual she did not receive an instant response. She starts to explore her surroundings, astonished how realistic everything looks and feels. She's never seen anything like it and is very impressed. She laughs to herself, observing the primitive lifestyle people were forced to live with, information printed on stacks of paper, paying for things with paper currency, people corresponding long distances on pieces of paper, everything was on paper. She wasn't old enough to remember a time when the world was like this. After a closer inspection, she starts to feel that something isn't quite right, even though she's not sure what it is. She moves closer to the newsstand and notices a typing error on the main headline of the newspaper. She found this to be very unusual. Suddenly, Yuki is pulled into an alleyway by a mysterious stranger in a lab coat. It's Dr. Yamamoto. He frantically tells her that people witnessed both of them appear out of thin air, and authorities have probably been notified, and that they need to move quickly. He leads her in the direction of the 24-hour camera store, which is a few blocks away. As they walk, he explains that he had just regenerated nearby, minutes before she got there. He wonders if this occurrence is a probable result of time desynchronization, akin to a slow clock. He was meant to arrive in the sphere and has just come to understand that something went wrong. Yuki's device receives a message from Kenji, happy to hear she made it through. Wishing her luck. Yamamoto, now seemingly talking to himself, comes to a conclusion. The retry option must be the automatic default action whenever your data is lost unexpectedly. This was an unforeseen glitch they did not anticipate. Yuki is puzzled. Interrupting him, Yuki explains Hiroshi's plan, and also the other unforeseen glitch, how Hiroshi's loved ones have been disappearing. Yamamoto is concerned. Yuki starts to really notice the imperfections in their surroundings. People they pass on the sidewalk appear slightly deformed or contorted, with abnormalities like 6 fingers or crossed eyes. Colors seem distorted, and there was a dog with no head and 2 backsides. As an expert in generated images, she understands why this is happening. It's the same reason the images produced by her department are never quite right. Government regulations stopped them from solving this simple problem years ago. As they approach their destination, Yamamoto reminds Yuki of the importance of returning home without being detected. He emphasizes that even the smallest action could alter the course of history. Casually entering the 24-hour photo store, they notice the store clerk is missing an arm and seems suspicious. While pretending to browse the store for batteries and film stock, Yuki quietly asks Yamamoto if the people are aware of their own abnormalities. He suggests they probably aren't. We're experiencing a sort of reimagined version of history. These events, or non-events, have already occurred. We're just reliving them. They locate the items they need but, lacking any form of currency, realize they cannot pay. Just as the one-armed clerk turned away for a brief moment, they seize the opportunity and quickly dash out the door. Bursting out of the storefront, they bolted down the street, running as fast as they could. They turned a corner, and they were spotted by a police car on the other side of the street. The 2 cops scrambled as they jumped out of the car and ran after them. Yuki and Yamamoto try their best to escape, but the police in this time period seem to be good at their job. After a short chase, they found themselves cornered, their path blocked by the flashing lights of police cars. With nowhere left to run, they were apprehended. Caught and handcuffed, they're taken to the police station. Once there, they are processed and put into a temporary holding cell. Yuki could tell that Dr. Yamamoto's concern had turned to something worse. His face in his lap with his hands on his head. The whole way there, it almost seemed like he had been here before. Standing beside the broken man in the cell, she asks him point blank how he knew about the 24-hour Photoshop, if he had just regenerated. He starts shaking his head in his lap, looking utterly defeated. A broken Yamamoto begins to explain that when they were running their initial tests they never anticipated that time dilation would be a factor. We thought we were dealing with wave function. But it seems we ended up with a sort of grandfather paradox, due to the high velocity that the carbon data needs to travel to generate in the sphere. Yuki, not knowing that much about quantum physics, could not fully comprehend what Yamamoto was trying to say. She asked him, "What are we going to do now?" and Yamamoto does not know what to tell her. Within less than an hour, special agents showed up to the police station and they were escorted to the cell block where the 2 scientists were locked up. 2 men in black suits approached the cell and examined them. They looked at each other and signaled the guard to prepare them for a transfer. After a few minutes, one of the police officers opens the cell and tells them it's time to go. They both stand up and begin to shuffle out of the cell. Walking in front of Yamamoto, Yuki tries to think of a plan, but there doesn't seem to be any opening for her to make a move. The place is crawling with cops, and the chances of escaping at this point are very low. Just before they're about to be handcuffed for the trip, Yamamoto suddenly reaches for the cop's gun. He manages to wrestle it out of the holster. He quickly disengages the safety. Before the agents and the cop could react, he lifted the gun up to the back of Yuki's head and pulled the trigger, her brain matter splattering across the precinct walls. Ultimately, placing the barrel under his own chin and taking his own life. Yuki finds herself regenerated in the empty sphere. As she regains her senses, she is shocked and horrified. The system prompts her to retry. And without hesitating she chooses no. She steps out of the dark inner sphere to see Kenji and Hiroshi waiting for her on the catwalk. They run up to her and put a blanket around her shaking body. She was very disturbed about what she had just experienced. They ease her over to the table by the terminal and explain to her that she's been gone for longer than expected. They begin to ask her questions about what she experienced in the sphere, and she explains to them what happened. She mentions that when they both regenerated, they were spotted by witnesses. She told them that he also mentioned something about a grandfather paradox, but she didn't know what that meant. As she is talking, Kenji begins to process what she is saying, and after thinking about it for a minute, comes to the conclusion. Because there is only a singular image on a celluloid, that's the only place and time you will be able to regenerate, it's a constant. Because we did not anticipate the time dilation glitch, even if we did superimpose his new image on the old celluloid, he would end up regenerating in the exact same place at the exact same time, and there would always be the same witnesses, changing the future. Hence the grandfather paradox. There was no way to bring Yamamoto back. Just as Kenji finishes explaining, alarms start to ring out across the whole entire facility. Within moments, they could see government agents entering the building on the security cameras. The experiments they were conducting in the virtual reality department involved artificial intelligence and quantum mechanics. This was in direct violation of international law, and anyone implicated would face the harshest possible consequences. Yuki, observing the security monitors, pulls out her device and pulls up the picture of her fat cat, Whiskers. She starts to cry as the realization of the situation begins to hit her. She is devastated. The government agents enter the department door with force, breaking through it with a massive explosion. Agents and military men quickly engulf the department, surrounding them and pointing their weapons. They begin to arrest them one at a time. Yuki took one last look at the photo of her beloved pet before they aggressively snatched her device away. About to receive the maximum penalty, she starts noticing that things look different. Nothing is really as it was. Her co-workers and the agents seem to have imperfections and disfigurement like the people in the sphere. Yuki, still shaking from the shock of what took place just moments ago, is utterly traumatized. Imagining what it would be like, living the rest of her life in a jail cell, in a world full of abnormalities and imperfections. She thought about it, and after short deliberation, she swiftly grabbed the agent's gun out of his holster, turned off the safety, and put the barrel to the side of her temple. Before the agents could act, she pulled the trigger and killed herself one last time. Never to be regenerated ever again. A permadeath. The end.